Why is it called practice? Well, it's called practice because only by practicing does it mean anything. And learning is good. It gets rid of ignorance. But you can also forget what you've learned, and then it's back. Ever do that? Ever learn a foreign language? And then a speaker of that language magically appears, and you're like, I should know what you're saying right now because I learned it for 3 years, but, duh. Ever have that experience? Certainly there's someone listening to this that knows what I'm talking about. But see, that's just one of life's little mysteries. Ignorance. But as for the other hindrances, we did discuss doubt. See, it's really about catching it in the wild. Catching it within your own, within the matrix of your own psychology. Does it matter when you do that? And not just catch it, but flip it, right? Pull a combination on it. Throw it. Then it counts. That's what the practice is all about. It's like when you're got that Komodo with that yin and yang sign right on the chest. You get that patch. That's when you know how to throw doubt. It comes at you like this. Wow! You hit it. You come in close. Change the center of gravity. Drop down. And whoa! A doubt gets thrown. That's what that patch is all about. But sometimes it gets a move on you, and sometimes it throws you. Although I like to equate doubt to more of a headlock that you aren't really realize. You don't really realize that it's got you in one until you realize it, and then there's a counter to it. A couple different counters, but you have to realize it first. That's the whole point. That's awareness. That's sati. See, awareness is not knowledge. Knowledge is something else. People like to think they're aware when they have knowledge, but it's not the same thing. Awareness is live. It's in the here now. You have to make it alive. You have to awaken it if it goes to sleep. Like, hey, doot, here's a coffee for you, Sati. I know you were sleeping on the job there for a while. Slipped into automatic egoic consciousness. But we got a whole bunch of problems up in here. Look at this dissatisfaction here, this, and what the heck is this? Like, it's usually a combination of things. Here's another subtle one of conceit. That is subtle. See, doubt is invisible until you see it, and so is conceit. And even monks have it. Religious people have it. A lot of religious people have it, in fact. And why? Because they put in so much work. They have the robes, they have the rituals, they have the lifestyle, they have the respect of others. And they're there from early morning till late at night, and they do it over and over again. So what happens? Well, invisibly, conceit builds up in their minds. I have to be a good person. Otherwise, these externalities would all be for nothing, and things of that nature. You can think how stupid, vulgar people could just easily slide into that way of thinking. easily slide into it over time, especially. Why am I a ballerina? Well, I'm wearing a tutu, and I know how to put on the shoes, and I know how to dance. And I have the conceit that I am one, but when it comes showtime, if I'm flipping and flopping on the stage, then what does that conceit really do for me except make me look like a fool in front of others, and especially to the internal audience that is captured by conceit. Oh, here, you ever seen a terrible performance? A lot of times, like how there's some kid, I'm gonna fill you in, kids. A lot of your performances aren't very good, especially the theatrical kinds. You're very wooden in your lines. Sometimes you forget them. But what do we do? Because we're so nice at the end of the performance, if you can call it that. Everybody claps. Clap, clap, clap. Oh, isn't Johnny and Jane and Jill, aren't they so special? Well, that's some of the worst things you can do if you're a religious person, and do that to yourself. And just confirm nothing other than conceit, the calcification of your mind, the growth of a fungi like pride. Can't know new things, can't do things differently. That would be wrong. Well, why would it be wrong? Well, I learned it this way, and this is the only right way. And I don't concede that I was doing it the wrong way, or that I could learn wrongness or a wrong way of seeing things, such as conceit does, because it's so damn subtle. And I can't admit that to myself and drop it or change, because then that would feel bad. I would feel inadequate. I would feel less of, or lesser than, how much I esteem myself, essentially. A self, an invisible self. Sometimes I admit that the self exists when it suits me, and sometimes I discount that self, or that caricature of myself, applies to myself. I'm not conceited. You ever had a conceited person tell you that? Deny. And then oftentimes deny, attack, and flip. You're conceited. You're the conceited one. What about you? What about you? Choo, choo. These deny and attack and flip. See, I think we should just call it daft. Like daft people use a daft method like that, instead of getting into reversing offender and victim. That would be Darbo, right? That's too damn complicated. I can't remember that. We'll just call it daft, the daft technique. But here's the point. The point is that conceit does not help your practice. It hurts it. It doesn't matter how long you've been practicing. It doesn't matter. It's the here now that matters. So you put in 20 years and you've got conceit out of that. That was a bad bargain for your time. And as despicable as it might sound to hear, is that's what a lot of religious people get out of their religion, and they don't really have much of a practice to speak of, but they do have conceit at the end of that ridiculous journey called life that they're on, where counterintuitive things can happen like that nobody wants or expects, and yet that's how this zany dimension works at times. So what helps? Well, ladies, those 56 bows mornings and evenings, they help. And forget about making up excuses, because it's that type of practice, self-abasement, that lets you say, well, I don't think this is necessary. See? Ooh, why don't you think that? Oh, I'm beyond this. This is just for beginners. Oh, really? Beginners? Aren't we always, isn't it about eternal beginnings? What is it about yesterday that is now in the room that you think that a practice doesn't need, such as no self, and how to get there, which isn't with the conceit that one doesn't need it because one has reached some advanced level? Because that would be delusional, wouldn't it? That would be conceited. See, it's a helpmate to delusion, conceit. It likes to make you think you've reached a level that you don't need the thing that you need in order to advance, which is to say, or don't need, which is to say, no self. To advance, no self is needed all the time. When self comes, there's no advancement. That's it. It's the end of advancement. It's the beginning of self, right? It's the seed, the roots of it, the germination of it, the slow appearance of a wall from white to moldy green. It's that little tinge, like the room was closed and there wasn't enough. Have you ever been in rooms that have a moldy kind of infestation? It's too much humidity and there's not enough airflow, and you left something locked, like a cooler, instead of keeping it open, and then you open it the next day and there's just a slight smell and a little greenness on what otherwise would be pristine white walls. That's it. See, the subtleties of conceit start off like that, which is to say nearly invisible, which is how it advances. Now, advanced practitioners will notice it at some point. Like, just like people with mold. Well, it sort of stinks, but maybe I'm imagining things because I'm so special it couldn't happen to me. So let me air it out a little bit, and then you close it again after an hour. But you need to keep that thing open to keep the light and air circulating, which is to say, creating the environmental variables that conceit cannot grow in. But it can grow in a closed self. And a closed self is not receptive to self-abasement practices. It's resistance. That lid, trying to pull it, oh, it's stuck. I just opened it yesterday. It's stuck. And then if you really pry it, then you hear that ripping sound, like rip, and then you look in, oh, all that mold stinks. Oof. That vinegar smell. Have you ever smell that? That mold? That's not how things stay fresh. So what do you got to do then? Well, then you need to start going into some purification rituals, like self-abasement. But those 56 bows, morning and evening, that's like applying citrus, right? A fresh rag that you might have boiled in water and then put some lemon juice in there, and you wipe it out, keep it clean. And it's just something you do. It's not something, you're not saying you're a moldy person, you're not conceited, but it's just a practice you do to make sure that if any mold did get started, which you can't really see with the human eye, that you're going to hit it with the frag that way. And that's how you stay dainty fresh from self and conceit, which are subtle hindrances, and yet so damn toxic. I think in a lot of cases it's one of the chief conduits of suffering and dissatisfaction is conceit. Because where do you have all these delusions about things you're dissatisfied about if you don't have a self that it's anchored to? Now, some people go to retreats and they'll do this. They'll take a 10-day practice where it's extreme enough that that they can do a full wipeout because they're constantly being battered by externals. And I think there's something to be said for that. Doing something as thorough as that from time to time, but that daily practice, that those 56 bows, that's something that keeps the maintenance going in between those full resets. And it's worth it because self is a killer. It's a main conduit. It's like copper dust. And there's electrical, static electricity all around you. And you're sprinkling that copper dust in your soul. That's where that static electricity gets in, starts hitting you, starts spreading the dissatisfaction. So doubt and conceit, those are two very subtle and very hindering hindrances the further along you get on the practice. But for people that don't need to get into the theory, again, the simple practice is just do the rituals and stay awake to these subtleties. And if you don't have access to a monastery, it's the 1 meter monastery, and then maybe 56 bows isn't enough. Someone was like, teacher, what do you do? Well, what I do, I put a 0 on that 56. That's what I do. Because I'm a stubborn horse. And if that doesn't work, I'll put another 0 on the back of that. Because that's how serious I take practice. And because I'm a stubborn horse, I don't make accusations as far as being defective or not. Right? I wouldn't play a Stradivarius the same way I would play something else. I wouldn't bang on a Steinway piano the same way I would bang on a plastic imitation. Etc. and so forth. Different people need different things, and some people think, oh, the practice, that's just something esoteric, that's just some type of hippie thing, burn some candles, some incense, and get people in the mood. And people have some crazy opinions about what they think the practice is. But me, I only tolerate minty freshness in that area, and I'm constantly on guard for it because it constantly creeps up. It's like being in a bad neighborhood. See, a lot of people think they're in the best of neighborhoods. That's conceit. Oh, nothing like that. I don't got no problems like that. That's how they think. Those are the people that got the problems. My neighborhood's not bad. You look out the window, somebody just got mugged. It's like, whoa, it's Friday evening. First person just got mugged for the grocery money. This guy's saying he's not in a bad neighborhood. This guy's standards are low. Lower than mine. Who wants to live in a neighborhood like that? But okay, if you live in that neighborhood, then take the precautions. Now, see, a lot of them are hypocritical. They'll be like, all right, well, let's go take a walk then. Oh, no, I don't think that's a good idea. See, but why would they say they live in a nice neighborhood? Well, it's probably conceit. But maybe they're just trying to fool you. How much are they fooling themselves? Well, you see, a lot of people say one thing and do another, don't they? But in that case, it's working against conceit, because he doesn't want to lose his dang life, does he? Doesn't want to be inconvenienced in that way. Doesn't want to heap unnecessary suffering upon himself, does he? So some people aren't as stupid as they let on. And yet, what does the practice do? Well, the practice gets you superhuman results, super normal results. Because, you do 560 bows and you still got some self left, and then you tack on another 0. At some point, that self's going to tap out. But only if you don't think, well, look at me, I'm such a amazing practitioner. The teacher said do 56. I'm doing 560 just like he does. And that's why I'm a tough guy or gal. Well, you didn't lose conceit, did you? You could do 56,000 bows. And if you think that way, you're still at the starting point. That's how subtle and insidious conceit is. That's what I was saying. Don't think just because I say that religious people that do this for decades and still have conceit that somehow I'm inferring that I'm above that mistake. That mistake can happen to anyone at any time if they're not on top of their game. Okay? That's another thing. Like live firing exercises. That's what people say. This is a big deal in the military. Like when they start shooting live ammunition. Live firing exercise. Yeah, well, they're still shooting at targets. And live firing exercise is not like the real thing at all. When other people are shooting back and ammo might be limited, like, oh, they said there's going to be 50 crates, but there's just 2, so do what you can, and you've got an onslaught coming down the pike. It's a little bit different. So you're going to be able to shoot straight then? Going to hit those little targets as they pop up, like pop. Oh, there's another one. Pops up, ping. Pops up, ping. Here's your score. 99%. Oh, wow, I'm awesome. You're going to think like that? How about when it's raining and then they're not popping up like that and it's dark, and like I said, you've got other problems. Like you might be missing an ear or equipment or medical treatment or the 2 other guys that were supposed to be there. Or. How you going to do that? Going to be 99%? Is that what you think? That's what a conceited person would think. A rookie. But becoming a veteran, you could become conceited too. Like, well, I just won the last 5 battles, so obviously I'm going to kick their butts the 6th time. You could get that way too. Hey, no, it's different every time. Today has no connection to yesterday, and it has no connection to tomorrow. See, isn't that weird? WYRD. It's pretty weird, isn't it? Why did those two guys get smoked and you didn't? Is there a reason? Maybe it was just a few degrees. The guy on the other side, he was smoking that cigarette butt and it hit his lip, and then he jerked a little bit, that one fraction of a second. That's why the two other guys got smoked and you did. Get rid of that conceit, people. Someone wrote in, it's like when you said that, or when you described how that simp was hugging that mannequin, I surge laughed so hard that I set off a choking fit and nearly died. Please don't do that again. Thank you. Hey, look, this is improv comedy. I want to warn people. I'm trying to make this funny. Although some people, like I said, they haven't laughed once. I'm glad you got at least one laugh out of the misfortune of others. Even if it was just metaphorical, but that metaphor does hold up, doesn't it? But it would take a simp to know it, wouldn't it? A lot of them don't know just yet what's waiting for them if they play that game. But we'll leave it to them, won't we? That's not one of those games that you can win a lot in, can you? But you sure can lose a lot. And there is something to be said for satisfaction. I don't care what anybody says. If you've got it and it's for real, you're just not claiming it. God bless you. Find yourself a cigar and light it. Make it a big one and savor it, because many people never get to that pinnacle of human achievement. They don't. And that valley of death is filled with broken limbs and other stuff that nobody needs. So I'm glad you got a laugh out of it, finally. See, I think if I changed the tempo and my delivery on all of these proverbs that I spit, it really would be a proper comedy routine and people would laugh and they would pay to hear it, but maybe only in a free society of my imagination. Which brings me back to external validation. I think in late stage so-called capitalistic societies that you always have people selling you might lead to the false assumption that society is in some way set up to cater to the proclivities of the individual. And when that doesn't happen, especially over a long period of time, that finally some serious dissatisfaction sets in. And then perhaps even animosity towards society at large. And yet that's all just based on a fundamental misperception. Society isn't set up to cater to the external validation of the individual. It just isn't. And it would really be foolish for an individual to go out there expecting it, because isn't that a recipe for disaster? And yet, on the other hand, you don't need to resent the fact that you can't find satisfaction in externalities, because the Buddha realized that even before capitalism was invented. Now, that's not to say that I am legitimizing the term or concept of capitalism, which I already believe is an obsolete system that's run by a bunch of despotic goons that are causing all of this cultural distortion at this time. But look, I'm optimistic that real society will someday regain its composure and reorganize and restart itself without all of the malignant developments that have happened since Adam Smith came around and started snowing the public with gold and value and monetary theory. Whoosh, look at me juggling balls. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Get rich quick. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Work till you die. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Be wealthy, right? Yeah, whatever, okay. We've all been taken for a ride, but still, we did get a couple of good things out of it, haven't we? And that's, see how you can flip your perspective. Don't look at the 20% of just enraging, outrageous craziness that it's caused and is causing. Don't look at that. Look at, okay, maybe 20% is too much. Or 80%. I'm gonna say, okay, look at least how about we flip it? We don't look at the 80% of things that are dissatisfying, but maybe that's too much too. What would you say? We could have a poll. How much of it is dissatisfying? How much is not? And how much of it is based on ourselves, our own perceptions, and how much is it really based on externalities? And then we'll do sort of a comprehensive comparison of pros and cons. And where can we get better, and what could we do without, and so on and so forth. Like maybe the divide and conquer strategy, we could dispense with that. Get back to representational democracy, right? Because remember, Andrew Jackson, that masterful man, he did have problems with the same type of loony goonies from the banking sector in the 1840s. Surprise! Come around, go around type thing. But now they think with, their propagandistic networks that they got the public licked. And if you look at just the slide in civility since the 1950s, you could give them some reason for thinking that. There's objective reasons for thinking that. But if they win, everybody else loses, and at some point, how's that not going to catch up to them? Like kings of BS Mountain. Who wants to be that? Well, nobody with any inkling of good sense, but that's not what they have. So at some point, I think it will come to a reset kind of moment. And until then, look at just how many good things are here. So just push that off. It's probably not going to happen tomorrow. I mean, maybe next month or in a year, but you might be dead in 300 days or something like that. So it can stay a theory, can it? And until then, you can look at the little things that might not be as enraging as the things can be out there on those hard streets. But that brings me back to external validation. Yeah, external validation in any damn form is misguided. If it happens, just look at it like a freak occurrence. What? You really like me? You really like me? Oh my God, how's it possible? Right? You could be like that, but what does it matter? That's delusional. How about you could have like what was it, Funniest Home Videos or something, have like a camera and just have actors pretend that they like somebody and then they come out later and say, ah, just kidding. We really didn't like your performance at all. You're on candid camera, and then you point to the camera and laugh. You zoom in on their faces. Some like try hard artist or something. They probably wouldn't find that very funny though. I can't believe you wrecked my life. I run to the psychologist every week now since then. See, you can make art funny. But yeah, if that happened, that would be cruel, wouldn't it? It would be cruel. Because people get their hopes up about external validation, then it gets... There's old style, there's old style 40 millimeter Swedish cannons, you know, like that, those flat guns, just shoot that idea down. So they're jalopy of a plane flying high over this earth. Gets shot down. Boom, 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 boom. Tail gets blown off. One of those big old B-52s. Is it a Buford cannon, something like that? Got them flying in low, and then disintegrates their vanity in this realm. No hero ceremony for that. But yeah, think of your thoughts like that. Oh, I want to be externally validated, darn it. Yeah, shoot that idea down. There's really no point. And like I said, if they do show up for a parade, and just look at them, they got the Saints come marching in, they got that going on, and they're not just performing a rote kind of performance, they're putting a lot of energy into it because they're really feeling it. Okay, it's a nice performance, but what has it got to do with you, really? What does it have to do with the trials and tribulations and the real battles that you fought that people say weren't real? But after the fact, want to come and celebrate you as a international hero, as you feel you deserve to be celebrated, that they decide to make one day of the year just a full-on day for you, as you feel you deserve. Yeah, make it ludicrous. Blow up these ideas, blow up the conceits, and then shoot them down, and then be free of them. That's how you do it. Coming back to that Meister Eckhart point that if our mind is captured by losses, it's captured by Mara. Look at the Five of Cups card from the weight deck. That's what I'm talking about. He's obsessed about the 3 spilt cups. But right behind him, he's got 2 full cups. And 1 cup is enough. And he's got 2, he's got double. But he's turned his back on satisfaction. That is the symbolic representation of this very human phenomenon. And look, he's wearing the black. It's like a funeral. Because all he can see is those 3 cups. That's it. His life is over. But by focusing on that, see what he's turned his back on? He's turned his back on the good things. More than enough is what he turned his back on. Twice. So this is a human phenomenon, and it's an illusion, and it's very foolish, and it's very unskillful, and yet we can find ourselves doing that again and again and again and again. In every situation, every phase of life, When you're young, it might be because you don't have these things you think you need to be happy. When you're old, you're not happy because you're not young, and so on and so forth. It could be a movie, just one unskillful way of looking at things after the next. Or the converse of that. Like, all right, wait a second, I've just realized that I've turned my back on 2 full cups. I only need one. Hey, let me turn that frown upside down. Let me just turn my back on the 3 spilt cups instead. How about that? You see that number 5? That's Radho. See? That 5 is Radho. So Radho, the right practice, is don't do what the person in the card is doing. Turn your back on the losses and focus on what you have. Radho. Because you know what we get out of life, no matter what, is old age, sickness, and death. So look at those as the 3 spilt goblets. You focus on those, gonna miss out on the good things, whatever it is. If you're sick right now, then think of the good times. Think of how well it will be, either when you get better or when you pass out of this bardo under these conditions. And practice in the bardos to come. Because I said that's what nibbana is, but really what that is parinibbana. Oh yeah, and that third goblet, death, that's a double-edged sword. With the right radho, right practice, it's liberation. And it's the beginning, a new beginning, under good conditions, because your practice reached a level of skillfulness that you didn't think was possible. It's more skillful. You're going out more skillful than you went in. Right there, that's one of those goblets that you're ignoring. So that's what you think about. And you think, oh, this is terrible, this is macabre. What? No. What part of your radho have you been neglecting? The Buddha with each breath was thinking about death. Ananda only 7 times a day. And so when parinibbana came, it was just a transitional phase. In fact, they turned death into a goblet, not one that was poured out. It's one waiting for them. Because old age and sickness, guess what? Takes care of that. That's right, death. There's no pain after you die physically in this bardo. But perhaps psychological, spiritual pain might persist into the bardos, which is why the whole practice is set up so that when death comes, you do not become a hungry ghost like these damnable and damned unskillful people that you're surrounded by. At times, in fact, you might be at times. That's the only fear you should have, is that your practice is not good enough going into the next dimension. And you have every opportunity to better your practice in both old age and sickness. But death is what liberates you. And the thought of death can liberate you from every worldly concern. Are you dead yet? No. You can hear this, you can understand this, you can feel this down into your bones. Well, it should liberate you from any type of worldly problem. Because look at the bright side, you're not dead yet, are you? So in fact, that third goblet really isn't poured out, but it's if you want to think of it as worldly concerns and pain and suffering, then if it got poured out, then I guess it was better you didn't drink it, because that's how you poison yourself. Someone wrote in and was like, I know you say, imagine a strong, this is my attempt at a strong Eastern European accent. I know you say you're on the Atlantic, but I think this is a lie. I hear distinctly this is the Black Sea. Is this true? Thank you. Well, you've got excellent ears, my friend. But some secrets are going to have to remain that just due to security concerns at this time. So this is a comedy show, so I am breaking a little bit, just a little bit, from the 5 precepts, because I'm taking artistic license. And I want to make that understood, that this isn't direct truth on all things. It's just somewhat of a performance art to give people, how shall we say, certain images, to convey to them images and ideas for the purpose of bettering their spirits in hard times. So maybe, but I would have to say that it probably wouldn't be Crimea at this time. I think you could probably assume that that's the case, because how could I be there under such conditions unless I was a prisoner? But I do like the Black Sea. I'm not going to say what parts, because that could give it away, but you see how that sounds pretty similar? People with similar, how about this? Spirit in different places, thanks to these waterways that have taken us so far through past lives. So how about synchronicity and eternal recurrence? How crazy is that? Have you ever thought that you've heard this before? Isn't that strange? You see how similar certain people can be, even if they come from different places? How is that possible? It's a mystery. Well, not really. Our ancestors were all over the place. My ancestors specifically were shipbuilders, Normans. So we were in places like Russia, which was not Moscovia, which your historians should be able to explain to you. They stole the name. So, isn't that crazy? Oh, by the way, Normans were in Sicily during good times. And now we've got who knows who there. Maybe some of us are still there. Oh, nice parts of France? Yeah, that's right. Why was it nice? Who are the nice people there? Yeah, so some grapes, right? They do have a lineage, and they do taste good, don't they? But yeah, they shouldn't be crushed out and uprooted and wasted by a bunch of people that don't know better, should it? But yeah, shoulda, coulda, wouldn't. Look at what bad people do. They try to take the good things, don't they? And when they do, it's a tragedy. And when they don't, it's a victory, not just for the people, but for the entire universe. So someone wrote in, it's like, teacher, Buddhism is so international, there's so many different schools. It's so confusing, what shall we do? How do you see all of these international movements at this time so that we can gain clarity in these matters? Thank you. Well, yes, it is confusing. Let's start with Shakyamuni, right? The wise man of the Scythians, Siddhartha. That's where it started. So we have his teachings, we have the Pali Canon, we have the Theravada school that knows that and keeps very close to the teachings. So when we look from the Japanese perspective, they say you should start with Theravada. Then they say you should move on to the Mahayana schools, which is Zen, right? It comes from the Chinese Chan, which is the word for jhana. Okay. So you can already see how Buddhism was filtered through the East, starting in northern India with the Scythian Siddhartha, which was a Westerner. You could consider the Scythians a very close tribe to the Greek tribes. But you can see how it gets filtered, and then it becomes more exotic over time as it goes eastern. Also, the civilizational catastrophe that was the Mongolian phenomenon that destroyed the Silk Road, northern India, and Valanda University. Civilizational catastrophe that the West and the East don't really know how to categorize it, but it was one of the worst things to happen on this planet ever, even to this day. Most people are blissfully unaware of that, don't understand that, don't want to know about that. But anyway, yeah, unfortunately, religions and politics and bad kings and stupid politics and terrible people have played a role, and not a good one, in the development of Buddhism. Because, of course, worldly, horrible, stupid, ignorant people that are not in control of the three poisons, but think they are, have always tried to use it for their own purposes. But of course it's not just limited to Buddhism. Look at organized religion across the world. You have these idiot Christians that essentially aren't practicing Christianity, but their minders, their chicken coopists, tell them they are, when in fact it's essentially inverted morality. So any religion can be infected by gonorrheic social activists. And that's when we come to sort of the modern Buddhist versions. I would say the only schools that you could give somewhat of a benefit of the doubt to are those that are based in either Thailand or Japan. Now people will say, oh, what about Tibet? What about Tibet? The Dalai Lama? Yeah, look, maybe the Dalai Lama, but also maybe not. Because think about it, Tibet no longer exists as a country. It has been subsumed by Chinese communists. And they really, 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 really don't want to lose Tibet. And so what poses a threat to them? Well, the Dalai Lama, right? He has the legitimate claim to all of that land and all of that history and all of that Vajrayana Buddhism, or at least that branch of it. And they want that too. So where are they active? They're active in Nepal. They're active in their own country. They have a Mao Zedong kind of Buddhism, and they consider themselves Buddhists, and everyone else is, Western agents or something like that. And that also has affected the Vietnamese and the Cambodian schools to a certain extent. Burmese schools, wherever you have these radical leftists pretending to be humanitarians as a wrapper to conduct subversive political activities. And I hate saying that. I wish it wasn't true. I really do. I wish it wasn't true. I'm sure so many Buddhists wish it wasn't true. But yeah, Vietnam was a total mistake. Anyone can agree with that. But essentially, it was the same strategy the Chinese employed in Korea. And are the South Koreans better off that they didn't pull it off in South Korea? So what about the Vietnamese? Well, the Vietnamese got screwed over by world politics, but it wasn't the narrative that it was the United States' fault. They had a corrupt political kind of group of people, caste system, and they had the communists, which to this day have prevailed. They pretend like they're not that, but once a country goes communist, it really never goes back to normalcy because it gets into sociology. It's high-tech despotism. But of course, they're always trying to change the wrapper. Oh, we're capitalists now. Oh, well, who's running the courts? And so that brings us to pretty ridiculous figures like Nat Han, who established Plum Village community and was behind so-called engaged Buddhism, and unfortunately fits the description as a SJW light kind of version. Now some people, all the Vietnamese, oh no. Well, look, the problem with these agitators and subversives is they're not just bad. They have a lot of good, but their organization is infiltrated by unreliable and really politically despicable kinds of people. Whether they want to admit that or not, of course they're convinced that they're good people, but just to illustrate the point how ridiculous some of these actors are, the life of Nat Han is quite illuminating, especially when he went back to Vietnam in 2005. Just again naively thinking, or perhaps conceitedly thinking, that the government structure there had changed, for which he also was most likely working for the whole time, with all of the nefarious kinds of consequences and bad karma that must have had. But I'll just read the Wikipedia. It's still up. I mean, they'll probably try to take it down, but during his 2005 visit, I'm reading it now, Nat Han's followers were invited by Abbot Duc Ninh, I think that's how it's pronounced, a member of the quote-unquote official Buddhist Sangha of Vietnam, to occupy Bat Na Monastery and continue their practice there. Nat Han's followers say that During a sacred ceremony at Plum Village Monastery, located in France, by the way. He relocated there, just like a lot of the Viet Cong did in 1966. In 2006, Ning received a transmission, probably some type of telefax from Nhat Hanh, and agreed to let them occupy Bat Na. Nhat Hanh's followers spent $1 million developing the monastery, building a meditation hall for 1,800 people. The government support initially given to his supporters is now believed to have been, surprise, a ploy to get Vietnam off the U.S. State Department's religious freedom blacklist, improve chances of entry into the World Trade Organization, and increase foreign investment. So in other words, all that money basically it was a scam. And then what happened later? Well, in 2008, during an interview in an Italian television, Nhat Hanh made some statements regarding the Dalai Lama that his followers claim upset Chinese officials, who in turn put pressure on the Vietnamese government. The chairman of Vietnam's National Committee on Religious Affairs sent a letter that accused Nhat Hanh's organization of publishing false information about Vietnam on its website. Uh-oh. That was surprising. So you can read through the rest of the thing. In September and October 2009, a standoff developed, which ended when authorities cut the power and followed up with police raids augmented by mobs assembled through gang contacts. The attackers used sticks and hammers to break in and drag off hundreds of monks and nuns. Senior monks were dragged like animals out of their rooms, then left sitting in the rain until police dragged them into the taxis where black society bad guys pushed them into cars, a villager said in a phone interview. 2 senior monks had their IDs taken and were put under house arrest without charges in their hometowns. So yeah, that's how engaged Buddhism was received in the hometown of that humanitarian who was pushing some form of SJWism, social justice warriorism in the West. Also, the organization continues to this day. But that's how they were treated by their lefty loon counterparts and sponsors when they tried to do it in their home country. But of course they did the first, oh sure, yeah, come on in, invest. That 1 million whatever that built there, that stays there. And you would think, well, wouldn't he have learned his lesson? Well, no, he went back, probably under coercion to give the appearance to his followers that some type of agreement was made, or that was just an anomaly. But then he ended up having dying shortly thereafter. So, strange. So, that's very disappointing for Vietnamese Buddhism. And yet we can understand once you get people like that, Chinese and other communist torpedoes pretending to be humanitarians in the room, then this is what they're going to do. So Tibetan Buddhism is in a bad way, which is why if you want to get into Vajrayana Buddhism, then I do recommend the Japanese school, which is called Shingon. So there was a Japanese monk that went to Tibet in the 8th century, thereabouts, learned everything about Vajrayana Buddhism from the masters at that time, and they've more or less preserved it in its original form. And because Japan was not taken over by the Soviet Union or China, they don't have necessarily SJWs in Shingon at this time. But who knows? Maybe they do. Going back and forth to Tibet or Nepal or India. Oh yeah, India is not a good place. India also had some strange movements in the 1950s and 60s that involve the untouchables. It's a very strange. Of course, Gandhi has now been exposed as a fraud, as well as MLK kind of thing. And there was one of those guys in the 50s in India. They have a very anti-Western alternative history. They call themselves Hindu nationalists. That's a rapper. They're essentially some kind of socialist, sociologist kind of regime there. With a lot of PR and a lot of corruption and a lot of disdain for Westerners and Western civilization. And if you ask them, well, where did you get your military gear? Well, it's all Russian, so that should tell you basically everything you need to know. So whatever little stories they have, like not Hondas, to bedazzle Westerners with exotic displays, see through that. It's just a pretense. So yeah, and Plum Village isn't the only one. They established other monasteries in the U.S. And I'm not saying all of their practitioners are bad, but it's something that cannot be recommended for those reasons. So in order to figure out whether your so-called Buddhist center or meditation center or whatever they call it is legitimate, you have to check the lineage. And if the lineage has any of that sociology, 60s counterculture sociology, any of it, it's no good. So Shingon for Vajrayana, that lineage appears to be good at this time. And then of course Theravada schools from Thailand appear to be good at this time, but outside of these countries, again, you're looking at these kinds of social agitators that are in the game that think they're Buddhist, or you have the Buddhist rapper. Oh, I'll just go here, and then I'll go there, and oh yeah, sure, I'm for social causes and stuff like that. But surprise, they're connected to the international, the octopus of sociology that has had genocidal effects on the West at this time that are indisputable, and which makes them cultural war criminals at this time, and yet they're still there with the pretense, burning incense for themselves and doing like Greenpeace. Oh, they're into the environment, always presenting themselves as something good, but they're not that. They're delusional. That's number one. And Not Han's life really does prove that point. But it's hard to get clarity in these things because they're big into propaganda and disinformation. And so, yeah, even if people are saying save Tibet, you don't know. Is that person from Nepal? Is it a family of people that want to be revered as Roids, or religious operators in disguise? Because, Russian Orthodox Christianity also has a bad reputation at this time for good reason, because religion is seen as something that it cannot exist separate from a totalitarian state. And that's in their despotic countries, and also if they can export the lineage with a bunch of suckers, they'll do that internationally too. So again, the lineage comes from, again, any Southeast Asian countries that have had socialist communist infiltration are questionable. India is questionable, Nepal is questionable. And like I said, the Tibetans, take them one at a time. It's terrible that they have to deal with this problem. I wish them the best, but they are up against a determined kind of enemy that will stop at nothing to wreck their tradition. So wherever they're able to prevent it, that's great. But if they're not, it will go down as another tragedy, perhaps on the level of the destruction of Valanda University. So with that, now you know, well, the Western schools, how many of their lineages have remained free from SJWism in any form. Even a drop of it is unacceptable. We don't know, because these Western boobs that were bouncing around Southeast Asia, many of them were counterculturalists to begin with, and they have not repented that. They think that they were good people, that they are good people, just like old Nat thought he was until he was proved otherwise. And yet look at the conceit he had. He still, or perhaps he was coerced into it, he still went back despite what happened. And finally his conceit led him not to recount on his very wayward life. But yeah, for his followers that follow him around like, a North Korean dictator that he liked to think himself to be, probably, to be revered like a god, they're not going to question that. He's their venerable teacher. And it's sad, it's understandable. Again, I might be wrong. I'm not going to say that I know all of the ins and outs. And like I said, it's possible for these people to have some good effects. It's very dangerous for Westerners to become associated with these things. And also, I would say, the sad people that think that they're getting Buddhism, but they're getting Buddhism with exterminationist agitators as well, which finally is not good for Buddhism internationally, domestically, or karmically for any of the practitioners, especially the subversive agents that think they're so clever that they can snow vulnerable people looking for some solace in these terrible and flip times. That's pretty reprehensible, I would say. I would say their karma is on the level of Devi Dada. But look, people make deals, they make compromises, and we don't live in a perfect realm. Which is why, Watts and Sanghas, they probably have to be more decentralized and be aware of these things so that good schools and good lineages can thrive that are not associated with exterminationism or their humanitarian wrappers that they wrap it up in, including the Buddhist wrapper. So what is my advice? Research the lineage with a lot of cynicism, and essentially those geographical locations I mentioned, that's a very easy one. Just, this is out of India, this is out of China, this is out of Nepal, this is out of Vietnam. Probably not very legitimate. In fact, probably pretty dangerous. But you might be able to, look, just because you're sitting in a meditation hall doesn't mean you're going to die or something like that if somebody takes you to one. or they're doing some type of ceremony and you don't, they don't interview you or something like that, get your details, then you're probably okay. But if they turn on the Jehovah Witnessism kind of recruiting or cultish kind of manipulative Scientological kind of thing, then you might want to bounce pretty quick and keep it light, keep it distant. So Shingon for Vajrayana. Zen schools, like I said, I'd say most Japanese schools are probably okay. Again, South Korea, it's maybe 50-50 because you had Western idiots mixed in, and also their own problems with people pretending to be South Korean, right, on board with that and actually not being that. But of course, less bad as in Vietnam, where they suffered a total military defeat. But yeah, people, I want you to have some compassion for them. For example, the people that fled Vietnam for good reason, so-called boat people, they have some compassion. And then finally they go to get some Buddhism, and then they have charlatans cooperating with regimes that they ran from, and so have some compassion. But compassion to a point, not to the point of delusion. And unfortunately, those organizations are delusional and also exterminationist to a certain extent in the West with their fake Buddhist wrapper. And there are $1 million investments in despotic regimes that have no intention of changing whatsoever. The only thing they are looking to change is their appearance. Marketing, that's what they understand capitalism to be, which essentially, just when you hear that term translated into Prigozhinism, because that's what they mean. They're not talking about Adam Smith, who, again, the whole theory is rather outdated at this point, but it's considered to be some type of foundational ideology for economic success. That's not really true, is it? Are there any economists that haven't been captured by that idea? Well, then you should probably listen to them. Because if we want prosperity in the future, it's going to have to look a little bit different than capitalism, but not the socialism of the despotic kind either, right? But if you're waiting on state solutions, you might be waiting longer than a lifetime. So Dana and also the other precepts and the other practices that are coming from a good lineage without social agitators and ideologues, that has a good future. So it's not all gloom and doom. And again, my whole purpose is not to create contention and whatnot, but in a way, it's to warn people, to be advised that these types of games are being played in all different types of religions at this time. And unfortunately, Buddhism is not even close to immune to these things. And the whole Tibetan situation should be an indicator of that. And it's not going away. It's probably going to get worse. And for the Chinese, just have some compassion for people looking for the pure Dhamma that have absolutely no chance of experiencing it in their country, which had a very venerable Buddhist tradition for centuries. How terrible is that? But of course, compassion to a limit, to a degree. Or they connected somehow to some people, well, They might have just a sad story and that's it. So, is that terrible? I'd say so. But on the other hand, perhaps real practitioners can start new lineages. But of course, you'll just have to see whether or not they will have success under the totalitarian conditions, how they could do that, how they could manage that. That is their problem. Different places will have different problems. And the West is having a lot of problems right now. And it looks like they're going to have more problems going into the future. But doing due diligence on lineages and personalities and not buying their propaganda as a united Buddhist or something like that, that's very wise at this time. And as far as Western phonies and counterculturalists go, unfortunately, I would say the universities in Western zones are vectors for this kind of ideological gonorrhea. And so probably venerable professors died out, I would say, sometime in the 70s or 80s, with very few exceptions. So if anybody's coming out of a university since, let's say, 1980 and thinks that their university degree speaks for them, it actually does not. This is well documented. They had a method of marching through the institutions with alternative history narratives that they perpetuate to this day, which essentially were exterminationist and are exterminationist. And they're very proud of that. And they have people that they get together and they clap about that. And they're very conceited about that non-achievement. And they have oftentimes very auspicious sounding degrees from so-called auspicious universities. But that's only if you don't know the backstory. If you do, realize they're substitutionists. They're the people that, like eggplant can people out of can people, that substituted real academia in the West. And there they are preening about what they know with their not so venerable connections and lineages, which really have nothing to do with Buddhism at all. Certainly not with good practice or good karma. So, could people be that shameless? Yeah, that's part of their gimmick. They're really convinced that they're doing and did the right thing. They are delusional. That's how to see them. So, are they venerable? I would say no. Probably the opposite of that. But yeah, of course, not all of the schools are bad. But coming back to Thailand and Japan again, although better than the ones I mentioned, still 50-50, and things change. You also have hostile forces within society that may or may not be associated with the international, and so learn what you can, where you can, but there shall always be animosities to a certain extent for different reasons people might think up, which don't have anything to do with true practice, does it? But it does exist. But when you meet truly exceptional people, then that is the essence of Kalyana Mitta, is it not? Yes, but what do or who do the Japanese have to thank for Shingon Buddhism? Well, it's the very venerable Udashi-sama. And so he deserves honorable mention as well as the Shogogenzo school, which is related to that. But as far as Vajrayana goes, it's considered an esoteric module that you can either add to your Buddhism or not, just like Zen. You can add it as a module or not. The Theravada school being the core. But it has mudra, mantra, and mandala techniques that many practitioners swear by, including C.G. Jung, the Swiss psychologist. So it's not to be discounted from even a psychological standpoint. And it has a lot of magic, as well as the inclusion of the Nagas, or recognition of the Nagas as a factor, which is the Shinto side of things, or the little people, as the Irish would say, which is pretty fascinating. It's has something, the perspectives has something to offer. Now, some people are taken totally into it, and they're drawn away from what I would consider to be good practice, but that would be bad karma for the practitioner, wouldn't it? So these things, of course, are not recommended for any old, normal, common, vulgar person. But for someone who wants to get into all of the different modules and to see if there's something in it for them, well then, Vajrayana is certainly a module. Maybe not the one you want to start out with, but one you want to add to your practice in a meaningful way. Kami, that's it. Kami, Nagas, and the little people, although sometimes they're not so little. But in any case, a fascinating area of study. Now, what would be the other module for poor Christians that have been so flipped in this time? Well, it's the Meister Eckhart module. So, do you have that? I would put it on the same level as Vajrayana, as a separate school. Do you have that? Do you know about that? You don't know about that? Well, how good is your practice? Are you a learned monk or not? I was thinking about attachments, and I was thinking, I believe, about some of the teachings of Eckhart. And he had the perspective that if you're attached to some type of relationship or some type of person or some type of position or some type of institution, and that attachment keeps you from pursuing the Dhamma, the practice, then that is bad karma for those people, those institutions, or those attachments. And that has a very good logic and rationality to it, doesn't it? It's very true. We are just delusional in these attachments, but if they are the thing that is preventing you from pursuing the practice with both hands in this dimension under the limited amount of time that you have, that is very bad karma for them. So you're doing them a favor by destroying that attachment. Even though they might see it the other way, what do they know? Perhaps they're delusional too, or they're normal, they're common, and they're vulgar. And so they might have a normal, common, vulgar reaction, especially in the initial phases, until they might finally at some point come to a point of enlightenment and understand, but they also might not. And there's stories of this. Also, Ajaman, who was even visited by spirits in the forest, some of them of a female nature that did not like that he was practicing with such vigor, and was looking for some kind of compromise. But what would have happened to that spirit's karma if Ajaman decided to stop the practice or only put in 45% of the effort, or 30 or 10? Well, in a cosmic sense, wouldn't you have to causally attribute that lack of achievement to the apparition or creature that led to that outcome? What would that mean? So these are great ways of looking at things and attachments and otherwise common, normal, persuasive arguments that would get in the way of true practice. So someone wrote in, well, would you call them bad Buddhists? These people that have been taken for a ride by a Plum Village and co. Because it's not just them. Thank you. No. I think they're victims. At worst, they're useful idiots. But I do think they've been victimized by political hacks and blobs and affiliated people with disingenuous regimes that are very worried about expatriate populations. Because just like his return shows, they don't want those people returning with ideas about freedom and democracy or anti-corruption or free Dhamma. They have to, what? That doesn't work for them at all. That's very dangerous. Because in their captured info bubbles, their alternative history is indisputable. In fact, it's a crime to question it. But they'll pay criminals to make sure people that are speaking an alternative, possibly a more true truth, that they get beat up or disappeared. So that's about how venerable they are, or not. So it's very tragic, it's very terrible, and yes, at best they're useful idiots. But again, when people have or are given the benefit of the doubt, look, they've done so many good things, obviously they can't be spies or stooges or snitches. Yeah, that's delusional, and that's not good, is it? Because if they are that, how's that good for good people if it isn't? So I hate that these things have happened. I hate this form of globalization. I really do. But if good people do nothing and say nothing, then how will the good prevail? If we associate the truth with goodness and not some type of political shimshammery or blobism. So it's mixed karma. How bad that will be in the future lives is really up to the imposterism or stupidity of said useful idiots. There's also potential for mixed strategy. If they really do help someone and they just have to play games because this is this worldly dimension, then maybe, again, their karma is not so bad. But as far as my point of view, they should reboot their watts without the pernicious influence of these actors and their very shameful tradition of doing these underhanded things all around the world. So it's not just them either. But if they don't do that, well, again, mixed comment. But if they want to pat themselves on the back and present themselves in a cult-like faction as infallible, then that might be more delusional than the practice was set up to be. And again, for Buddhists, look, it is understandable that you want no part of this, but these sing-songy, nicety nice people, this is how they get in. So just see it as a wrapper and as a ploy. And they absolutely do have an agenda, and it's sociological, and it's despicable on every level. So don't take them at face value, because we do live in times like this, and it doesn't help anyone if you're naive or victimized or consider yourself a Buddhist and yet are essentially working for some of the worst people on the planet. And you could bring up the war, blah, the war this, the war that, in an alternative history kind of way, as they like to weaponize history in a memory war. You can look that up, memory wars. It's one of their techniques. Look, the war was terrible, let's admit it, but it's over. But why are they still attacking the West with this measure? Why are they thirsty for revenge in this age, which is long gone, long past that time? So they're still the righteous party doing the good thing, doing bad things in the name of what again? Conceit, maybe? So essentially, as soon as the war ended, all hostility should have ended, but they didn't do that, did they? And this is a form of hostilities, and that's how it will be defined in the future. And so the people doing that, all they're doing is adding to their bad karma, and that has nothing to do with Buddhism, does it? Despite the rappers. Someone wrote in and was like, wow, now that you mentioned the misuse of far right, I just keep seeing it. What does it mean? Thank you. Yeah, this is psychological framing. First off, radical leftist, that's a term you very seldom hear, and if you do, it's considered something that was active in the 70s, and since then it died out. So technically, because they're presenting things in a radical leftist frame, they're invisible. Radical leftism, that's normalcy. That's the new normal. That's the normalization process, which is also a form of psychological terrorism. It creates a blind spot. Like, look at these hideous and horrible and grotesque people and ways of doing things and alternative history, and that's it. That's all there is. There's nothing outside of that. Or if it is, it's far right, or it's insert boogeyman. It's a 1984 kind of figure that is beyond all decency. Horrors, horrors. So it is 1984ism. And then they just sit there like, oh, what? Oh, we're radical leftists? Huh? What is this person saying? That doesn't exist. So it creates a blind spot in the mind where the new normalization process takes place, which essentially is exterminationism, despotism, and alternative realityism. And like I said, it's a combination of 1984, Brave New World, and also check out the movie with Justin Bieber called Time. I think it was around the early 2000s. That movie's watchable. It's good too because it inserts the class dynamics to this time where you do have a Prigozhinist class and a condom class that's really the radical class with their luxury beliefs. Now, they're presented in sort of a false way in the movie Time with Justin Bieber, but yeah, they are associated with the financial industry. Like before, people would have associated Wall Street with the right, but that hasn't been the case for many years now, and probably wasn't the case anyway. If you go back to the financiers of the Bolshevik Revolution, then you'll see Wall Street did play a hand in that, at least a faction of it, and it grew to become Wall Street. But you see, Wall Street's not very far from the propaganda district, so you wouldn't know that, would you? They present that as the opposite. No, they're champions of conservative values, and, you know, old boys network, and nudge, nudge, wink, wink. No, they're radical Prigozhinist class kind of people that never identified themselves with what they considered the hoi polloi to be, or the electorate, or its values, or the countries in which they operate worldwide. So it seems to make sense retrospectively, but of course they're always presenting themselves to be different than that. And also, yeah, charities. They got all these charities going, all these little things. Look how good they are. For example, Microsoft. Oh, he's just a little kid, this Gates guy. He's just a little kid. He was just playing with computers. But where did his parents come from again? Oh, and he's a total prick, and he's compromised national security of the entire West, not just the United States. And he's still, what? Oh, no, he's retired. No, the company is just doing that now. Like Apple, what? They have radical leftist politics too that happen to be exterminationist. So is it class? Is it what, a psychological class? And that's where you can feed back in more to the Brave New World dynamics. Scientific despotism. If you check out some YouTube videos on Huxley, I mean, in retrospect, he was a classist and a huge prick, and sort of half in the bag on the ideas. He thought, you know, because he was an elitist, that he would somehow skate through the Brave New World unscathed on an LSD ride, leveraging his position. But it's not really about the personalities or their individual karma. It's just about the ridiculous things they do, and then how they present that to unsuspecting, well-meaning, otherwise people. So, yeah, the radical class dynamic is a level above Brave New World, even though you have these different classes where, what is it, the alphas or something, are shown versus the epsilons. But they have that in the Soviet Union. Like the people that are educated, they've already been groomed for that, and they come in very presumptuous to alternative history questions. Like, wait a second, you can't say that. Well, why can't I say that? Well, I went to university, and you didn't. Well, why didn't I go to university? Oh, well, politics. But they're not going to admit that. That's why you should be very careful. Whoever's purporting to know anything about Russia, where the hell are they coming from? How the hell did they get out of that country? What type of deals did they make? Are they still making deals? Did they make deals that went wrong and now they want to make new deals kind of people? I don't know. I mean, could they be that dense? And it just same with the Chinese, they have these Confucian institutes. You have to be on board with the narrative. Don't be off board with narrative. Otherwise, it's going to be chicken coopism. You know, Asians do chicken coopism better than Europeans do. But still, look at despicable places like France at this time. Their entire left wing since the 60s. dropped every damn ball that they ever juggled. Check them out miming, in a upside down way. I would say the biggest losers of the 20th century on every level. And yet they front with their academia and their fashion and their apparent cinematic skills that nobody can recognize anymore because it's all flipped, but they will get together and clap for themselves. So that's where, again, that movie Time, if you place some sort of into that matrix, that film could be reshot with some updates to let people know. Put more of a, let's say, Indian, Chinese, Brazilian, Russian spin on it, like globalist at the top. Sort of like Willy Wonka, that atrocity that was out, but put in some of the aspects of that, corrupt blobs. And then just the good people being exterminated underneath them. Like how it's sort of a lot of the Emperor's New Clothes. See, one of the bad things about Brave New World is it gives the impression that such a system would be sustainable, when it really isn't. They just trigger exterminationist, a cascading exterminationist dynamic. And so it's one of perpetual weakening and stupefaction while they ramp up the propaganda. So if I were to do a new film, I could say Time times 2, it would shock people to their core about the reality of this malfeasance, this matrix of total stupidity that we live in at this time. But coming back to the point is, check the frames. If they consider the radical left to be invisible, you're already in their zone of normalization. You're already in a space of disinformation. You're already in alternative reality. Saint Anthony. There's another great one. Now it's Anthony of the Desert, because there's a couple of different Anthonys. But Anthony of the Desert was in Egypt, and he was trained by the Therapeutae in Egypt. Therapeutae were Buddhists. And surprise, he was a monk. I know that sounds so strange, but that's what he was. And there's a great story of him. It's almost like a Vajrayana kind of tale, where he was in a cave out there near the Red Sea and was in a standoff with a bunch of Naga, right? A bunch of evil spirits, and it was a battle royale. It was MMA. And he was taking hits. Well, anyway, he got knocked out, and some of his followers dragged him out of the cave. And he came to himself, and then he was about to go back in, and God appeared. And he was like, well, hey, God, why did you show up so late? Why are you late? And God was like, hey, I just wanted to see a son of God kicking some butt. How a son of God takes care of his business. This is amazing. I'm very, very proud of you. So that's sort of how God is. See, that gives you an insight. God is not somebody there who's going to be holding your hand like that. He is looking for people of his kind, like him. Which is to say, a champion of the universe. Okay? That's sort of what a God is. Godly. It's a champion. So hey, you got a first name Anthony, remember that. That's who your great 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 for like maybe grandmother. That's who she was thinking about. So remember that story, you're going through some troubles. Anybody know people named Anthony? That's probably where it's coming from. So that's what you wish for you. Be able to beat those demons or take a beating and get back in the ring. That's that type of spirit. So Anthony in the desert, you need another sort of Christian, sort of Eckhart, Meister Eckhart, sort of Buddhist kind of figure. He's another one. Some guy wrote in, it's like, look, I'm a Westerner and the self-abasement thing really gets me. Can you go into more detail about that, how I should look at it? Thank you. Yeah, I get it. I think that is the hardest part, but it's the most necessary part. If you think of the ego as a soup of Negredo in a vessel, every time you make a bow, for example, it's like putting a little hole, like a pinprick in the bottom of the vessel of the ego that's holding all of the Negredo substance, egoic substances. And when you do that pinprick, it's like a little drop. You got to keep doing it at the bottom. And those little droplets start to drain out all that crap that is taking up your vessel with worldly strivings and perceptions and everything else. It's just a little pinprick here, there, 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 and you just do it as a ritual. Finally, it's not personal. Depersonalize the process. That's the whole point. You have to depersonalize things. You have to depersonalize your life. You have to de-egofy your existence. And it requires repetition, and it requires dedication, and it requires sincerity. If you don't have those things, it's not going to work. See, that's the thing. You get a bunch of people in church or what have you going. If Catholics, they know that you have to stand, you have to sit, you have to kneel. I think it keeps people awake. But a lot of people just go through the motions. No, it has to be sincere. It's not sincere, you will not penetrate that egoic membrane, and that Negredo substance will not start draining out. Now, why do you want to drain out the vessel of the ego? Well, that's the only way. That's the spiritual hygiene process, the only way that you will be filled with godly substance, right? And even if you're not filled with something, just being relieved, being filled with nothing is the point. Now, here's the great thing about nothing is, how about there's a bunch of different statements you can make. One of them, nothing is important. Now, see, there's different ways of seeing it. Now, if you just heard that term the first time, you'll think, well, that nothing is important. That means that there's absolutely nothing that is important. But then the other way to look at it is, nothing is important. Just like in a room, it's important that there's nothing blocking your way so that you can make use of that room. If it's filled with junk, it's not useful. So nothing is useful. But then you can also look at it in the common way, nothing is useful. So these are, whenever you're dealing with the word nothing, there's a magic involved with it. And it's counterintuitive to a worldly person. For example, an ego is nothing. Or an ego is not nothing. You see? But once you get into a state of nothingness, then everything's possible. That's the counterintuitive, magical side of nothing. Another one, I have nothing. You see? First you think, okay, that means he has nothing. But if he has nothingness, you see it in that sense, well, that means he has infinite possibility. Your mind is not weighed down by this or that perspective, this or that story, this or that persona. And that's where we get to the Jungian kind of diagram of the personality. Look at that persona all the way up on a bubble at the top of a circle. But you got to get past that. You have to get down into the depths. How about reconnecting with God? He calls it archetypes. To get down past that, you need a lot of nothing to get there. But that means clearing out the something that's already there. But seeing the something as nothing, being able to depersonalize. That's the pathway to God. That's essentially what Eckhart said, and Jung confirms it. Being egoically captured in a persona is very limiting. And it can also be excruciating, especially if you take yourself, like you, yours, and your concept of that seriously. And you also don't think it's optional. No, I am this person. This story, it's me and mine. Well, if you forgot that story, if you had amnesia and just started over life again in the here now, it wouldn't matter. That story wouldn't matter. But people keep regenerating these stories. Sometimes they think it's a good thing because they have some conceit that they did something important. How about this? Nothing is important. See, it has two meanings. First, someone would think, well, this is somewhat irresponsible to say nothing is important. But then when you think nothing is important, nothingness can't flow through a room without nothingness. That's space. Space is nothingness. How could you breathe the air if there wasn't a certain nothingness? Ever get caught claustrophobically in a very tight space? You're surrounded by materials. Well, that's a lack of nothingness. You have a big space, big sky. There's nothing there. There's nothing to do. There's nothing here. Well, that's freedom. You can do anything, more or less, when there's a lot of nothingness. So that's the principle to cultivate. And self-abasement is how you get there, because you're chipping away at those hindrances of self or persona. Oh, I couldn't do this. I'm an extremely accomplished person. I'm a professor, doctor, a billionaire, adventurer, this, that, and the other thing that you've thunk up for yourself. You can't do this. That would be beneath you. See, you're up at the top of the persona on the Jungian diagram. You're not going to be getting in contact with any archetypes or the eternal now, that thinking that way. You're captured in a little box. And the problem is other people, why are monks often solitary or practitioners? Well, because other people want to box you in. Oh, wait, no, I know you. You're the carpenter's son. What are you doing here? Talking about philosophy. You can't do that. Get back to work, right? People will try to box you in. That's sociology. You can't say you don't want to be around horrible, vulgar people. We've redefined society to make that the norm, and that's the way it's going to be, and don't change that because you're a bad person otherwise. See, that's what radical leftists are all about doing. redefining social interaction and enforcing inverted norms. So, but the solitary person doesn't have any of that going on. They don't have to negotiate with others that have limiting ideas about you and would like to enforce them every chance they get. Like, you just woke up. Oh, you got to do this, this, and this. Oh, you can't do that, that, and that. Like, what? You've got a schedule, right? No, you don't think, just do. Be captured in an egoic existence. That's what other people want for you. That's the best thing for you. It's the best you can do. That's what they say. But that's why nothing is important. And see, you can see it the first way instead of the second way, including their opinions, right? Their imaginings of who and what you are, their boxes, their demands. It's not important. I mean, it depends on how much importance you want to imbue or give to those things, but you should question yourself, why am I giving this or this or this or this person's expectations more importance than I would to my own self-care or my own spiritual freedom, liberation, development, however you want to see it or call it? Why would I prioritize all this other junk and not that? Why wouldn't I make nothing important or more important than these other things, if nothingness is a catalyst for spiritual transformation or realization? You see? Counterintuitive, not very worldly. They always want you to be making something, doing something that they can judge from an external point of view, but you shouldn't adopt that point of externality within your own persona. Should you? Because nothing is important. And finally, if you have nothing, you have nothing. Now, I really don't want to discuss the P. Diddler thing more than I need to, but it is a part of hybrid war that has been waged against the culture of the people of the United States. And there are foreign actors involved, people associated with that, and of course a class of a Prigozhinist condom class kind of political tolerance for those types of cultural inversions, outrages, subversions, and destructions. Just think of all the lives of the people that have been negatively affected by that. And there's a lot of money involved. So just think, how many times did you park in a place and then get a parking ticket, but they were letting massive freak-offs happen in an important city or important cities around the United States for going over a decade. And so here's the what they do, right? They use a lot of drugs and a lot of cameras, and they get a lot of influencers on camera doing a lot of drugs and doing a lot of other things, and then they blackmail them for the rest of their lives. And so we're talking about a network of people that could be blackmailed in perpetuity that are in the thousands at this point. And they mentioned, who was it? Prince Harry was involved again, another royal. They sort of have a hard-on for the UK royal family. Then you've got Justin Bieber. Who else? Oh, the whole fashion show, like in Paris, and so they were doing recruiting there. They were doing trying to get the young talent, the nice looking ladies that can wear clothes to get them to their parties where they could do what they want with them, and that's what they did. So yeah, Fashion Week, big on that one. Not too many people showing up to the Shanghai Fashion Week, but Shanghai people, they go to these international events and have their pimps, I guess, splash around money, and then they collect the tapes. So this is a hybrid war. That was a hybrid war operation. It will go in the textbooks. And the people that let that happen and funded it and financed it and told themselves those stories, they're going to go in the textbook too. And that P. Diddler is not the only one that should be in jail, but we're talking about a network. I'm going to say at least 10,000 people that should be behind bars at this time. But we know we have sort of a glupus globus, incompetent kind of government, probably by design. So how many people will finally go? Well, we don't know. Probably, 10. I'm willing to bet at the competence level, just looking at it from the outside, I'm going to put the competence level at sort of 0. Maybe 10 people will go to jail for that. So that's what you're looking at, Californians. We'll just call it the freak-off state with an incompetent political class that's collaborationist with sino-soviet cultural subversion and inversion programs in the year 2024. So put that one in the history books. As yet another exterminationist atrocity against Western civilization perpetrated by the condom class via criminal negligence, at least. Remember, it's only condom class because that's the Teflon that keeps the blame off them. But you can bet they let their raw dogs destroy as many lives as they absolutely did and could. As in could get away with, or were let away with, or given the go-ahead to get away with. So every last one of those people responsible for that in any way should go away for life. Perhaps there should be a public trial. You could have a different type of freak off. You could send the freaks off in outer space. Maybe they could develop a rocket for it. Speaking of rockets, yeah, the Chinese, those wonderful, clever businessmen that got into the WTO as a developing nation, or had a favored status as a developing nation, they just launched a ballistic missile the other day without telling anybody. Like, they live right next to Japan, South Korea, Philippines, that they've been banging boats on and stuff like that. Just decided to launch a missile just for the hell of it. One of those with potentially nuclear warheads on them that they're developing at a rapid pace while supporting being the main supplier of war materials to an active war going on in Western Europe. So freak off. I think we need some freak off missiles. California needs to freak off the freak off program. But God bless them. At least they shut down some of it. But I wonder if they're going to go all the way, because, those types of videos sent to Chinese military, they don't think that's going to be much of a trouble to mop up places that are overrun with creatures like the creatures that were running around LA until yesterday. Not really scared about that. But back in the day when guys like John Wayne were walking around, they would be thinking twice and 3 times and 4 times. And probably just would leave it be. because they didn't want no piece of that kind of action. But what do we have today? Who are the social engineers out there in those big universities? They ever look at these pictures of these people sober, or are they wazzed out on ecstasy and coke like the rest of them? Oh yeah, nice little other factoid is that P. Diddler had a madam, right hand is as she was known, like Gazelle. What was it? What was her name in the he didn't hang himself guy kind of thing? It's Elaine Maxwell or something like that, or Giselle Maxwell. I can't put together the name right now, but it was the Epstein kind of situation. He had some type of high profile kind of woman that recruited all these girls from these fashion shows and let them get P-diddled, drugged and raped, and put in insane asylums and blasted up with the newest forms of gonorrhea. So just like the Kardashians, I think they were in on those FOs, freakouts too. So don't think these people are worth anything. And if there was, let's say, a movement to restore and mobilize the United States, those people would be in jail forever. But ladies, watch out for those shady other ladies that have real bad habits and hang out with real bad people, because the effects of that, they're pretty bad. Just letting you know. Sort of like a feminist with a sexual component mixed up with some kind of witch's brew. You drink that down, you're done. Not just in this life, you fail the multiverse. Oh, the other little funky thing was that all these tough mugglewumps and what have yous, they'll take any old hole they're dealing with. All of them turn out to be gay. So I guess when the drugs are flowing and things are going sideways, they just don't care. And also helps if they're knocked out with some type of stuff, and then they can use it against each other later, like in prison. But they're tough. Don't forget that. TUFF, tough. They got them fancy clothes on and fronting. But what's behind their back again? These are the muscle men, like a Chippendale stripping contest kind of dudes. Somehow I don't think they frighten our adversaries very much either, do they? So you might want to put them on the tip of them rockets, because that's the way they like to ride. Bang, zoom, to the moon. See, people, don't forget, this is a comedy show. This has been your host. So don't forget to laugh, or at least crack a smile. This is some of the worst they can do, and look at what they've done. What's going to happen to them now? That karma's going to get them.